Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for. News in college basketball. I want to discuss that. Maybe at the end we do a little bit of football, but I do think Monday's show will be the deep dive into TCU and Georgia. But there was a big piece of news on Thursday in college basketball that we do have to lead with. And that was, of course, the news that Texas has fired Chris Beard. And so what I would say, every single week we do where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. This is one that I wish I had been wrong on. But I said the day that this police report came out, I think it was actually the day after when I did the show, I said, I don't believe that Chris Beard will ever coach a game at Texas again. I believe the term I used, I went back and listened, was I was 99% certain that Chris Beard would never coach a game at Texas again. I think I said I was about 80 to 85% certain that he never coaches a game of college basketball again. And unfortunately for everybody involved, whether it be Chris Beard, whether it be his fiance, whether it be the Texas basketball players, I was 100% right on this one. A little surprised that it happened on the time frame that it did. I thought it might happen a little bit closer to the end of the season. But as I said, Chris Beard was fired as the Texas basketball coach on Thursday. So let's get into it. Let's break it down. And by now, listen, I'm not going to get into the who, what, when, where, why of what happened. Everybody knows at least the minor details, but I do think I need to kind of just share some baseline stuff to explain why I believe that Chris Beard was never going to coach at Texas even 3-4 weeks ago when this incident happened. Incident report. This is all via the police report. This is not my opinion. This is not conjecture. This is not I heard on this or a source told me or a message board said. But the facts of the case, we'll try to be brief. And again, you can go back and look them up most specifically, but about 3-4 weeks ago, it was a Sunday night into a Monday. We all woke up to the news that Chris Beard had been arrested. The police report comes out, and the facts of the case were pretty straightforward. He and his fiance, they were living together, probably have been for quite some time, but they were at the time in the middle of kind of a little bit of a back and forth that sometimes happens in a relationship. Chris Beard was sleeping in a guest room. Chris Beard was in the guest room. Chris Beard's fiance walks into the guest room. She grabs his glasses, smashes them on the ground. And then a few minutes later, Chris Beard finds her in another room, and there's a little bit of a back and forth. It leads to him, according to police reports. Again, this is not my opinion. This is what the police allege to have happened. He grabs her. He throws her on the floor. He grabs her, throws her on the bed, puts her in a chokehold for, in her own words, about 5 seconds. He lets go, and that's where the incident ends. And so those are the facts of the case as we knew them. And as you know, anyone who has ever listened to me on this show on any platform, I am always a let the facts of the case reveal themselves guy, and I am always an innocent until proven guilty guy in terms of letting the justice system play itself out. But why I said from the beginning that I believe that Chris Beard would certainly never coach at Texas again and probably never in college basketball again, I did believe that there were two important things that came out of that police report that led me to that belief that Chris Beard would certainly never coach at Texas and probably never coach college basketball again. The first piece of information that came out from that police report, it was the fact that both parties, both Chris Beard and his accuser, his fiance, admitted that there was some sort of incident in the house. Okay. It wasn't a he said, she said, he claims he wasn't even there. She says this, he said that. They both agreed that there was some sort of incident. Now, who started it, how it escalated, what Chris Beard deems that he did relative to what she accused him of doing, it's independent of the fact that we all know that some sort of incident happened at the Beard household that night about 3-4 weeks ago. The other piece, and I thought this was really important at the time, and I believe this was ultimately what ended up being, I guess if you want to call it Chris Beard's undoing, so be it. But according to the police report, there were marks on this woman when the police arrived that night, that early morning. There was I believe the term was a bite mark on her arm and abrasion on her head. And so to go back to that day, to go back to that moment in time, I said Chris Beard is never going to coach again because of this reason, because of those the marks change everything, right? Because we all know how all of this stuff goes down, unfortunately. And we all know that a lot can change between when a police report is filed and when it's time to actually press charges, when it's time to actually go to court, all of that good stuff. We know that stories can change. We know that accusers can recant allegations. And it's something to a degree that this woman did. She took back her story largely a few weeks ago. But why, to me, I believe that Chris Beard was never going to coach at Texas again, was because we knew that an incident happened, and we knew that she had marks on her when she arrived. And so those were two indisputable facts. Those were two things that a lawyer couldn't argue, that even if you drop charges, even if the accuser changes her story, those two facts were always going to be there. And I did not believe that you could let that man, fair or not, continue as the basketball coach of their university. So ultimately, I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised at the timing. I think I said at the time, I made the analogy, and I'm not comparing one accusation to another, but I said I thought it was going to play out a lot like the Ime Udoka situation in Boston. Again, not comparing what Ime Udoka did, having a consensual sexual relationship with a staffer and a coworker, with what Chris Beard is accused of doing. But what I said was, I really felt like it was going to be something where the Celtics probably wanted to fire Ime Udoka that day, but lawyers get involved. You can't do it. Otherwise, there's lawsuits involved. And so the Celtics were going to kind of let this thing move on and eventually move on from Ime Udoka. And I thought that was what was going to happen with Chris Beard. I didn't think it'd be quite this early. I thought it'd be probably sometime in late February, give them enough time to look for a new head coach. But I thought at some point they were going to try and quietly move on from Chris Beard, which is exactly what happened on Thursday, excuse me. And so with that, what I want to do now is I want to talk a little bit about just kind of 3 closing thoughts on this. We'll take a break. And I do want to talk about what's next at Texas, because I do think there's an interesting kind of potential pool of candidates that could be available to Texas when we move on. But I want to stick to the facts of the Chris Beard situation and of Texas this year right now. And I do have 3 thoughts kind of in the bigger picture right now. One, I think there's a belief from a lot of people. I don't want to say everybody, from a lot of people that, oh, Chris Beard will coach again. That Chris Beard, this is, if Rick Pitino got another chance, and if Bobby Petrino got another chance, and if Hugh Freeze got another chance, it's only a matter of time before Chris Beard gets another chance. And so what I would say to that, don't be naive, don't be stupid, listen to the facts of the case, and understand the difference between those situations, okay? Because I heard a lot of that on Wednesday. Oh, it'll be a year. Chris Beard will do the apology tour. He'll be back somewhere soon. Understand that all of those incidents are nothing like what Chris Beard has been accused of by his fiance, okay? Bobby Petrino got fired at Arkansas for having a consensual sexual relationship. That was nothing criminal in activity. That was in his personal life. It was a personal mistake that he was fired for. That was what allowed him to come back. Rick Pitino, who we might talk about, because there's actually some interesting stuff that I got on Rick Pitino in St. John's later this week. But Rick Pitino, he had a personal situation with a female that wasn't his wife. He had an NCAA situation, but Rick Pitino never broke the law. Same with Hugh Freeze. He did some stuff that I know he regrets, because he's talked about it on this podcast, but that was personal. That was between him and his wife. That was between him and his family. It was cause enough to fire him from Ole Miss, but there was always a scenario where he could come back and coach college football again, which he is obviously doing, first at Liberty and now at Auburn. And so please don't compare the two, because this is criminal in nature. As I've said, we'll let the justice system play itself out. But to hire Chris Beard, okay, so now what I want to do is I want to talk about what's different, because this is an important differentiator, okay? Hugh Freeze, personal issue. Bobby Petrino, personal issue. Rick Pitino, personal issue, NCAA issue. Chris Beard, this is a public accusation of domestic violence. And so to think about Chris Beard getting hired again, here's what you have to consider. It's not only an AD that has to say, okay, okay, we're going to hire this guy. Remember, in a situation as high profile as a major college basketball coach, with the accusations that Chris Beard has, it has to get vetted by a lot more than an AD, okay? It has to get vetted by a school president. Many school presidents, as we all know, do not care that much about college athletics. Even if you get a school president that does care about college athletics and wants to have the best basketball program in the world, it's got to go through a board of trustees, a group of people that have the best interests of the university at heart, that are it's generally a diverse group of people, men, women, young, old. The idea of bringing Chris Beard and getting him through the board of trustees seems highly unlikely to me. On top of that, even if it gets through the AD, the board of trustees, the school president, here's the other part that you have to consider. You got to deal with all the public backlash that is going to come with bringing in Chris Beard. And so when people made the analogy of Bobby Petrino, Hugh Freeze, Rick Pitino, when it came to the Chris Beard situation, you know what I actually think the comparison is between Chris Beard and getting hired again? I actually think it's Art Briles, okay? And I'm not accusing Art Briles. It's a little bit of a different deal. It's not apples to apples. I'm not saying Art Briles is personally accused of what Chris Beard is accused of doing. But what Art Briles was accused of was covering up similar situations, domestic violence, domestic assault, sexual assault, things of that nature. Well, think about everything that Art Briles has tried to do to get back into coaching and how many times it's got shot down. How many times he's been a candidate for an offensive coordinator position. I remember at Southern Miss, they tried to hire him about 4 or 5 years ago. Southern Miss Board of Trustees, they looked at that for 1 second. They saw the public backlash. They said, we're not getting in the Art Briles business. Other schools, small schools, D2, D3, Art Briles is untouchable because of what he was accused of and what he was involved in at Baylor. Think about this. Liberty, the AD that worked with Art Briles at Baylor, Ian McCaw is the AD at Liberty right now. Even he wouldn't hire Art Briles this offseason. And so if Art Briles is untouchable, to me, that's kind of the Chris Beard situation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some school takes a chance, but it's got to get through a school president, a board of trustees, an AD, and then you got to deal with the public backlash. Then you got to deal with walking into 20 road arenas a year or 10 road arenas a year and dealing with all the repercussions that come with it. And so maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Chris Beard ever coaches a game of college basketball again. I don't really know what his future holds. Maybe overseas. I don't think it's in the NBA. I don't think it's in the G League. I don't think it's at any major level of college basketball. I don't think it's going to happen. Quickly from the Texas basketball perspective right now, and we're going to continue the conversation on candidates after a break. I had a few people ask me, Aaron, Texas is ranked in the top 10. You think they can rebound from this and be okay? And what I would say about Texas is, two things kind of come to mind on them. On the one hand, I do think they've actually done a good job as a team this year of dealing with all of the stuff that has come with this Chris Beard incident. Remember, he gets put on indefinite suspension. They play Rice. Since he got put on indefinite suspension, they've gone 5-1, with the only loss coming the other night against Kansas State. And so credit to those guys for blocking it out. But I find it hard to believe that this particular group of guys, and maybe I'm wrong, that they are able to just block out the noise and focus on the season ahead. And here's a couple reasons why. On the one hand, is there a scenario? Of course there's a scenario, and they've done a good job of it. And maybe this is the closure that they need to move on with the season. But more realistically, you guys and girls know what's happening behind the scenes. You love college sports. You wouldn't listen to this show otherwise. And so what I would say about the Texas situation, if you don't think right now that there are 13 guys in that locker room that are probably thinking of their futures, does it include Texas? Does it not include Texas? And if not, the adults in their lives, I think there's probably a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on that you and I and a lot of people don't know about. Think about if you're one of those star players, okay? If you're one of those players, period. You probably have people reaching out to your parents, to your AAU coach, to your high school coach saying, hey, John Smith, I'm sorry about that situation. But if you decide you don't want to be at Texas, we got a home for you. We know tampering happens with college sports. Now, players can't enter the portal today, but I would bet a lot of them are probably looking at their options outside of Texas right now. The ones that have NBA draft potential, I don't think there's any doubt that they're looking at that. And I just think it's going to be a lot to ask this specific group of guys to keep it together under all of the situation, all of the circumstances right now, and be able to move on without any issue going forward. Finally, what I would say in conclusion is this, and it's a message I delivered at the night of the accusation, the night of the arrest. But my last closing thought on this, and this might be the last time we ever talk about Chris Beard, the name Chris Beard gets uttered on this show. But what I keep coming back to is that I do think there is a life lesson here for all of us, okay? And what I'm not going to do is defend Chris Beard, say I feel bad for Chris Beard, whatever. But what I do know is a couple things. One, in the heat of the moment, we have all made dumb decisions that we regret. Now, you can never put your hands on another person. You can never put your hands on a loved one. You can never put your hands on a child, on a female, on a whatever, on an animal. You can't do that ever, okay? We understand that. But at the same time, I don't know that I feel bad for Chris Beard, but I think there is a lesson here about how your life can change forever with one quick decision, one emotional decision, right? Just think about Chris Beard. I'm not saying you should feel sorry for him, but this is a guy, 50 years old, Texas undergrad, Texas student manager, worked as an assistant, as a junior college coach, as a D2 coach, as a coach in the professional minor leagues, sleeping in his car to get the opportunity to one day be the head coach of Texas. And I'll say this, independent of what he did away from the court, I think he was the guy that was probably going to elevate Texas to the place that we know that it can get. He had a game plan. He had the staff in place. He had the recruiting budget. I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure NIL is pretty good. I don't think Texas is lacking anything NIL related. And it was all gone in the snap of a finger. And so I'm not saying feel bad for Chris Beard. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect and I've never made a mistake once in my life. What I am saying is, man, it can all go away in a second. And just be aware of that whenever you get emotional. I include myself. I'm an emotional guy. Be aware, be understanding, because it can all go away in a second.